Have you ever noticed how easily your peace can end up in someone else's hands? One person does not call you back, and suddenly your mind begins creating stories. Someone speaks to you in a way that feels cold or dismissive, and hours later you are still having the conversation with them inside your head. Someone misunderstands you, and you feel an almost irresistible need to explain yourself. Something does not happen the way you hoped it would, and before you know it, your entire inner world has changed. Nothing may have changed about who you are, nothing essential may have been taken from you, and yet, for a moment, it can feel as though someone or something outside of you has reached inside and taken your peace. Perhaps this is one of the quietest ways we give our power away. We imagine that taking our power back means becoming stronger, harder, more independent, or more capable of controlling what happens around us. But perhaps true power has very little to do with control. Perhaps it begins when you no longer require the world to arrange itself according to your expectations before you allow yourself to be at peace. There is a great difference between controlling your life and becoming responsible for the quality of your inner world. You cannot control whether someone understands you. You cannot control whether the people you love make the choices you wish they would make. You cannot control how quickly life changes, how long someone stays, what people say about you, or whether tomorrow unfolds according to the picture you have created in your mind. But you can begin to notice what happens within you when these things occur. And that noticing may be the beginning of freedom. Many people move through life carrying an invisible agreement with the world. The agreement says, I will be peaceful when you behave the way I need you to behave. I will feel worthy when you approve of me. I will relax when I know what happens next. I will forgive when someone apologizes. I will be happy when life finally becomes the way I think it should be. It seems reasonable until you realize what the agreement costs you. It places the key to your inner life somewhere outside of yourself. You may have spent years waiting for someone to return that key. Perhaps you have been waiting for a parent to finally understand you, for a partner to change, for a friend to recognize how deeply they hurt you, or for the past to somehow become different from what it was. And there is nothing wrong with wanting understanding. There is nothing wrong with feeling hurt. There is nothing spiritually enlightened about pretending that pain does not hurt. But there comes a quiet moment when another question becomes possible. How long do you want yesterday to decide the quality of today? Consider a woman who receives a message from someone she loves. The message is short. There is no warmth in it. Immediately, she feels tension in her body. She reads it again, then again. Her mind begins searching for meaning. Did I do something wrong? Is this person angry with me? Are they pulling away? For the next several hours, the message follows her everywhere. She makes breakfast with it. She drives to work with it. She sits in a meeting with it. She lies in bed with it. The message itself took perhaps 10 seconds to read, but the interpretation of it has occupied an entire day. This is how the ego often works. It takes a small event and builds an entire emotional world around it. It searches for danger. It wants certainty. It wants reassurance. It wants to know what everything means because uncertainty feels threatening. But imagine that somewhere during that day, she becomes still enough to notice what is happening. She takes a slow breath and asks herself, what if I do not need to know what this message means right now? What if I can allow this moment to be incomplete? Nothing outside her has changed. The person has not sent another message. No explanation has arrived. The uncertainty remains. But something inside her begins to soften. She has stopped asking the outside world to remove her discomfort before she can return to herself. This is a very different kind of power. It is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not need to defeat anyone. It does not need to prove anything. It simply says, I can be here without abandoning myself. Perhaps you know what it feels like to abandon yourself. You say yes when something inside you quietly wants to say no. You change your personality depending on who is in the room. You measure your worth by how useful you are to other people. You carefully watch their faces, their tone, their silence, looking for signs that you are still accepted. People-pleasing can sometimes look like kindness from the outside, but underneath it there may be fear. The fear of disappointing someone, the fear of rejection, the fear that love will disappear if you stop performing for it. And so you become very skilled at sensing what everyone else needs while slowly losing contact with what is happening within you. Then one day you may feel exhausted without understanding why. Perhaps the exhaustion is not because you have given too much love. Perhaps it is because you have spent too much energy trying to earn the love you believed you did not already possess. There is a deeper part of you that does not need to earn its right to exist. You might call it spirit, you might call it awareness, you might call it your true nature, your higher self, or the presence of the source within you. The name matters less than the experience. It is the part of you that exists before comparison, before judgment, before the endless question, am I enough? Think about the sky for a moment. Storms pass through it. Clouds gather and disappear. Lightning may fill it. Rain may fall for hours. Yet the sky itself does not become the storm. Your thoughts and emotions may be something like this. Fear can move through you without becoming your identity. Anger can appear without becoming your home. Sadness can visit without defining who you are. Someone's judgment can touch your life without becoming the truth about you. The difficulty begins when you forget that you are the awareness noticing the storm and begin believing that you are the storm itself. You say, I am anxious, rather than noticing, anxiety is here. You say, I am rejected, rather than noticing, something did not unfold as I hoped. You say, I am broken, when perhaps what is really happening is that a wounded part of you is asking to be seen with compassion. Awareness creates a little space, and sometimes that little space is enough for light to enter. Taking your power back may begin in that space, not by fighting your thoughts, not by becoming angry with your fear, not by forcing yourself to become positive, but simply by witnessing what is happening without immediately becoming it. You begin noticing the moments when you hand your peace away. You notice how quickly comparison changes your relationship with yourself. You were content with your life until you saw someone else's life and decided yours was not enough. You were comfortable with your appearance until you compared it with another person's. You felt grateful for your path until someone seemed to be moving faster. The world did not suddenly make your life inadequate. A thought appeared, and you believed it. This does not mean you should judge yourself for comparing. The ego has been comparing for a very long time. It compares bodies, relationships, careers, homes, spiritual progress, even suffering. But awareness allows you to smile gently at this habit and say, there you are again. There is no need for war. You do not overcome the ego by hating it. Hatred simply gives it another identity to defend. You become free by seeing it. The same is true of resentment. Perhaps someone hurt you years ago. What happened was real. Maybe they betrayed your trust, abandoned you, embarrassed you, or failed to love you in the way you needed. You may have carried that wound for so long that it has become part of the story you tell about yourself. And there may be a belief hidden inside the resentment. If I let this go, what they did becomes acceptable. But letting go does not say that what happened was acceptable. It says that what happened no longer gets unlimited access to your inner world. A person may have hurt you once. Resentment can continue the hurt for years. Forgiveness, when you are ready for it, is not necessarily something you give to another person. It can become something you give to your own spirit. It is the moment you begin saying, I will not carry this pain into every new morning. Imagine holding a burning piece of coal because you want someone else to feel its heat. Eventually, you begin to realize whose hand is burning. You do not have to throw it away dramatically. You can simply open your hand. This is the gentle nature of letting go. The river does not release yesterday's water through effort. It keeps moving because flowing is its nature. Perhaps something within you knows how to flow too. You may have forgotten because you have spent years trying to control the river. You have been trying to determine where life should turn, which people should remain, what should happen next, how quickly healing should occur, and when uncertainty should finally end. But life keeps moving. Children grow older. Bodies change. Relationships change form. Seasons pass. People arrive and leave. Plans dissolve. New doors appear where you never thought to look. The ego sees change and asks, how do I stop this? The deeper self may ask, how can I meet this with love? Those are very different questions. One creates resistance. The other creates relationship. And perhaps peace is not found by creating a life in which nothing unwanted ever happens. Perhaps peace grows when you discover a place within yourself that can remain connected to love even while life is changing. This is why taking your power back is not about becoming invulnerable. You will still care. You will still feel. You may still cry when someone leaves. You may still feel uncertain when you cannot see what comes next. You may still have mornings when old fears return. Spiritual awareness does not remove your humanity. It allows you to hold your humanity more gently. You begin to understand that you do not need to punish yourself for being afraid. You can sit beside your fear the way you might sit beside a frightened child. You do not say, "You should not feel this." You say, "I am here." And something changes when you stop abandoning yourself in difficult moments. You begin to remember that beneath all the roles you play, beneath the opinions people have formed about you, beneath your accomplishments and mistakes, beneath the story of what happened to you, there is a presence that has been quietly watching all of it. That presence was there when you were a child. It was there when you experienced your first disappointment. It was there when someone loved you. It was there when someone left. It was there during your greatest certainty and your deepest confusion. Everything around it changed, yet something remained. Perhaps this is what you have been searching for. Not a new identity, not a better version of yourself, not a life in which everyone finally behaves correctly, but a return to what has always been here. The peaceful self beneath the noise, the loving self beneath the fear, the awareness beneath the story. And if that part of you has never truly disappeared, then perhaps your power has never actually been taken from you. Perhaps it has only been forgotten. You may have placed your attention on so many things outside yourself that you stopped hearing the quiet wisdom within. You may have listened so closely to criticism, expectations, fear, comparison, and memory that the voice of your deeper nature became difficult to hear. But silence has not left you. Love has not left you. The source has not left you. The door has remained open. And the invitation is not to become someone more powerful. It is to remember where your power has always lived. As we move deeper into this, we will begin to look at the subtle ways the ego convinces you to surrender that power every day. Through fear, through attachment, through comparison, through the need to control, through the endless desire to be understood and approved of, not so that you can fight these patterns, but so that you can finally see them. Because once something is seen clearly, you no longer have to obey it unconsciously. And perhaps that is where everything begins to change. Once you begin to notice the places where you have given your peace away, something very interesting happens. You start to see that much of what has been controlling you was never the event itself. It was the meaning your mind attached to the event. It was the story you repeated. It was the fear of what might happen next. It was the demand that life should have unfolded differently. And this is where awareness begins to reveal the ego. The ego is not something you need to destroy. It is not an enemy living inside you. Perhaps it is more helpful to think of it as a frightened voice that learned very early to protect itself by controlling, comparing, judging, defending, and seeking approval. The ego wants certainty because uncertainty feels dangerous. It wants control because surrender feels vulnerable. It wants to be right because being wrong can feel like losing part of its identity. It wants approval because it has forgotten that worth does not have to be granted by another person. So the ego looks outward and asks the world to provide what it cannot create for itself. Tell me I am enough. Tell me I am safe. Tell me I am important. Tell me I am loved. Tell me nothing will change. Tell me everything will work out exactly as I want. And when the world cannot make those promises, fear begins. You may recognize this in your own life. Perhaps you send someone a message and wait for their reply. At first, you are peaceful. Then 10 minutes pass. Then an hour. You begin checking your phone more often. You wonder whether you said something wrong. You remember the last conversation. You analyze the punctuation in your message. You imagine what the other person might be thinking. Soon, you are no longer waiting for a reply. You are waiting for permission to feel okay. This is how quietly we can surrender our power. The phone has become an emotional doorway. If the right message appears, you relax. If it does not appear, your mind creates suffering. But what if, in that moment, you simply noticed? What if you said inwardly, I can feel how much I want reassurance right now? There is tenderness in that awareness. You do not shame yourself for needing reassurance. You do not pretend you do not care. You simply become conscious of the part of you that believes another person's response determines your peace. Then perhaps you put the phone down, you breathe, you notice the room around you, you hear a bird outside the window, you feel your feet touching the floor, you remember that life is happening here, not inside the imagined conversation in your mind. The unanswered message still exists, but it no longer owns the entire moment. This is what awareness does. It does not always change the situation. It changes your relationship with the situation. And that difference is enormous. Fear often survives by carrying you away from the present moment. It tells you what might happen tomorrow. It reminds you of what happened yesterday. It creates conversations that have not occurred and endings that have not arrived. The body responds as though these imagined events are happening now. You may be sitting safely in your home while your mind is living 3 months into the future. What if I lose this relationship? What if I cannot handle what is coming? What if I make the wrong choice? What if I end up alone? What if my life does not become what I hoped? Fear asks questions that cannot be answered because they belong to a future that does not yet exist. And then the ego offers its favorite solution: control. If you can plan enough, perhaps you will be safe. If you can predict enough, perhaps you will avoid pain. If you can control how others see you, perhaps you will never be rejected. If you can arrange every detail correctly, perhaps uncertainty will finally disappear. But life does not make this agreement with us. The ocean does not promise that every wave will be gentle. The tree does not demand that every season be spring. And perhaps the deeper wisdom within you does not need life to remain unchanged in order to trust it. Consider a person who loves someone deeply but is constantly afraid of losing them. Because of that fear, love slowly becomes control. They need to know where the other person is. They become uneasy when plans change. They interpret independence as rejection. They need repeated reassurance that everything is okay. From the outside, it may appear that they are trying to protect the relationship. But underneath, fear is whispering, if this person leaves, I will lose myself. This is attachment when it becomes painful. Attachment says, I need you to remain exactly as you are so that I can remain okay. Love says something gentler. I cherish your presence, but I do not own your path. This does not mean becoming emotionally distant. It does not mean pretending that losing someone would not hurt. Love can grieve. Love can miss. Love can experience enormous sadness. But love does not need possession in order to remain love. There is a freedom in loving someone without asking them to carry the responsibility for your entire inner world. You can care deeply and still belong to yourself. You can love someone and still remember your connection to something larger than the relationship. You can allow another person to be who they are, rather than constantly trying to turn them into the person your fear needs them to become. And when you do this, love begins to breathe again. So many relationships become exhausted, not because love disappeared, but because fear became too heavy. One person is trying to control. The other is trying to escape control. One is asking for constant reassurance. The other feels they can never provide enough. Both become trapped in roles. Awareness offers another possibility. Instead of asking, how do I make this person behave differently, you begin asking, what is this situation revealing within me? That question can change the entire direction of your inner life. Perhaps their silence reveals your fear of abandonment. Perhaps their success reveals your habit of comparison. Perhaps their criticism reveals how much your worth still depends on approval. Perhaps their independence reveals your need for control. Perhaps their difference reveals your attachment to being right. Other people become mirrors, not because everything they do is acceptable, not because you should tolerate cruelty or remain where you are repeatedly harmed. Inner peace does not require you to abandon discernment. You can create boundaries without hatred. You can leave without revenge. You can say no without turning another person into an enemy. You can protect your peace without needing to punish anyone. This is one of the places where ego and spiritual awareness can look very different. The ego says, if I forgive, they win. Awareness asks, why must my peace depend on someone losing? The ego says, if I stop being angry, what they did becomes acceptable. Awareness says, I can recognize what happened without carrying it forever. The ego says, they should understand how much they hurt me. Awareness asks, what if they never understand? Do I want my healing to wait for their understanding? That can be a difficult question. There may be someone in your life who will never give you the apology you deserve. They may never understand your experience. They may remember the past differently. They may continue believing they were right. If your freedom depends on their awakening, you may wait a very long time. But perhaps your healing was never meant to be held hostage by another person's level of awareness. Perhaps you can begin returning to yourself even without their participation. This is taking your power back, not from them, from the belief that they must change before you can be free. And then there is comparison. Comparison may be one of the ego's most convincing illusions because it can make a beautiful life feel inadequate in a matter of seconds. Imagine you wake up on a quiet morning. There is light coming through the window. You have something warm to drink. Your body is breathing. For a moment, Nothing is missing. Then you look at someone else's life. They seem happier. Their relationship seems better. Their home seems more beautiful. Their spiritual journey seems more advanced. They appear more confident, more loved, more certain. And suddenly the peaceful morning you were living 5 minutes ago no longer feels sufficient. What changed? Not your life. Your attention changed. You moved from experiencing your own life to measuring it against an image of another person's. The ego loves measurement. Who is ahead? Who is behind? Who has more? Who is younger? Who is more attractive? Who is more successful? Who is more spiritual? Even spirituality can become another competition if we are not aware. You may begin thinking that a peaceful person never gets angry, that an awakened person never feels afraid, or that someone who truly trusts life should never experience doubt. Then every human emotion becomes evidence that you are failing spiritually. But perhaps spiritual growth is not the disappearance of difficult emotions. Perhaps it is the growing awareness with which you meet them. A tree does not look across the forest and become ashamed because another tree is taller. It grows toward the light available to it. Its branches take their own shape. Its roots find their own depth. It does not hurry because another tree has already bloomed. There may be wisdom in this for you. Your path does not need to resemble anyone else's path in order to be sacred. You do not know what another person's soul is learning. You do not know what happens behind the image they show the world. You do not know the private fears beneath their confidence or the nights of uncertainty behind their achievements. And you do not need to know. Your work is not to become them. Your invitation is to become more present to the life moving through you. Or perhaps even that language can be softened. Maybe you do not need to become anything. Maybe you are simply removing the layers that prevent you from recognizing who you already are. The fear, the comparison, the old identities, the need to impress, the need to defend, the belief that your worth rises and falls according to other people's opinions. These layers can feel so familiar that you mistake them for yourself. Imagine carrying a heavy coat for many years. You have worn it for so long that you have forgotten the feeling of your own body without its weight. Someone once criticized you, and you put on one layer. Someone rejected you, and you added another. You failed at something and added another. Someone compared you with another child, another sibling, another student, and another layer appeared. Eventually, you began introducing yourself through the coat. I am not confident. I am difficult to love. I always fail. I am not good enough. I have to make everyone happy. I cannot trust anyone. But these may not be descriptions of your deepest self. They may be conclusions formed during moments of pain, and conclusions can be examined. You might gently ask, who would I be in this moment if I did not repeat this story? You do not have to answer immediately. Let the question create space. Who are you without the story that you are behind? Who are you without the story that someone ruined your life? Who are you without the story that you must prove your worth? Who are you without the story that your best years are gone? This becomes especially meaningful as you grow older. The ego can become deeply attached to youth, identity, roles, and the way life used to be. You look into the mirror and notice change. Perhaps your body does not move as it once did. Perhaps your children no longer need you in the same way. Perhaps a career that once defined you has ended. Perhaps someone who shared many years with you is no longer here. The ego may interpret change as loss of identity. Who am I if I am no longer this? But the deeper self may see aging differently. The leaves change, yet the tree remains alive. The seasons change, yet life continues moving through them. Perhaps aging is not simply the loss of what you were. Perhaps it is an invitation to discover what has never depended on age. Your awareness does not have wrinkles. The presence within you does not become less sacred because the body changes. The capacity to love does not have an expiration date. The source does not look at you and see a number. There may come a point when life begins gently removing the identities you once relied upon so that you can discover what remains without them. This can feel frightening, but it can also become deeply freeing, because every identity you no longer have to defend gives you more room to simply be. And being is something the ego rarely understands. The ego is always becoming more important, becoming more secure, becoming more admired, becoming more certain, becoming the person who finally deserves peace. But peace keeps whispering, you do not have to arrive anywhere to meet me. You only have to stop running for a moment. This is why silence can feel uncomfortable at first. When the television is off, the phone is put down, the conversation ends, and there is nothing left to distract you, you may begin hearing all the thoughts you have been avoiding. Old worries rise. Unfinished emotions appear. The mind searches for something to do. You may feel the urge to reach for your phone almost automatically. But if you stay for another moment, something else may begin to emerge beneath the noise. There is a silence underneath thought. You cannot force it. You simply notice it. It may be only a few seconds at first. A breath, the sound of rain, the sensation of sunlight on your skin. A moment when you are not trying to improve anything, and in that small opening, you may remember something very old and very familiar. You are here. You are alive. You are aware. And this moment does not need to be solved. This is where the ego begins losing its grip, not because you defeated it, but because you stopped believing every thought it offered you. A thought says, something terrible will happen. You notice it. A thought says, they do not respect you. You notice it. A thought says, you are falling behind. You notice it. A thought says, you must control this. You notice it. Awareness does not need to argue. The sky does not fight the clouds. It allows them to pass. This does not mean every thought disappears. Some patterns have been rehearsed for decades. They may return many times. The transformation is that their return no longer means you must follow them. You can hear fear without taking instructions from fear. You can experience anger without allowing anger to choose your next words. You can feel jealousy without turning jealousy into self-hatred. You can experience uncertainty without filling the unknown with catastrophe. This is inner power. It is not the absence of emotional weather. It is remembering that you are larger than the weather. And as this awareness grows, something begins changing in your relationships. You become less interested in winning every argument. Perhaps someone says something you disagree with. The old reaction rises immediately. You want to correct them. You want to defend yourself. You begin preparing your response before they have finished speaking. Then awareness enters. You notice the tension. You ask yourself, what am I protecting right now? Sometimes you discover that you are not protecting truth. You are protecting an identity. You need to be the intelligent one, the reasonable one, the spiritual one, the one who was right all along. And suddenly you may smile inwardly. There is the ego again, trying to survive through victory. What would happen if you did not need to win? You might still express your perspective. You might still disagree, but the energy changes. You no longer need to make another person wrong in order to remain whole. This is where love becomes stronger than fear. Love does not mean agreement. Love means you stop requiring sameness before you recognize the humanity in another person. You can look at someone whose worldview is very different from yours and remember that they too have known fear. They have lost things. They have wanted to be loved. They have carried wounds you cannot see. This does not erase differences. It removes the poison from them. Judgment begins to soften. And when judgment softens toward others, something beautiful often happens. Your judgment toward yourself begins to soften too, because the mind that constantly condemns others usually turns that same voice inward. You make a mistake and hear, you should have known better. You feel anxious and hear, why are you still like this? You return to an old pattern and hear, you have learned nothing. But what if awareness sounded different? What if it said, this is where I still need love? A garden does not grow because you stand over it shouting at the soil. It grows through light, water, patience, and the mysterious intelligence already present within the seed. Perhaps you are not so different. You do not need more self-punishment. You may need more light, more awareness, more patience, more willingness to see yourself without the old judgment. The seed already contains something you cannot see from the outside. It does not need to be taught how to become what it is. It needs the conditions that allow its nature to unfold. Perhaps your true self is like that. You are not manufacturing peace. You are creating space for the peace already beneath the noise. You are not manufacturing love. You are releasing some of the fear that has hidden it. You are not becoming worthy. You are questioning the beliefs that convinced you that worth had to be earned. And slowly, taking your power back becomes less about taking anything at all. It becomes a process of releasing. Releasing the need to control every outcome. Releasing the need to be understood by everyone. Releasing comparison. Releasing identities that no longer serve you. Releasing the belief that another person's behavior determines your worth. You begin to see that what you called powerlessness was often attachment. Attachment to an outcome, attachment to an opinion, attachment to the past, attachment to a particular version of yourself. And every attachment says, life must happen this way for me to be okay. Freedom begins whispering something else. I would prefer this. I may deeply hope for this. I may work toward this with love. But my connection to myself and to the source does not depend upon receiving it. There is tremendous peace in that distinction. You can have intentions without demanding outcomes. You can love without possessing. You can participate in life without trying to control the entire river. You can make choices while accepting that you cannot see every bend ahead. And perhaps this is where trust begins. Not the kind of trust that says nothing painful will ever happen. Life has never promised that. It is a quieter trust. The trust that whatever arrives, you do not have to abandon yourself. The trust that uncertainty does not mean you are lost. The trust that endings can contain beginnings you cannot yet see. The trust that the same intelligence that opens a flower and moves the ocean may also be moving through your life in ways your mind cannot fully understand. The ego wants the entire map. Spirit may only show you the next step. And sometimes the next step is simply to become still enough to hear it. There is something within you that does not speak with the urgency of fear. It does not shout. It does not threaten. It does not tell you that you are running out of time. It speaks quietly, sometimes as a sense of peace, sometimes as an inner knowing, sometimes as the gentle realization that you are finished carrying something. And the more you stop giving your attention to every fearful voice, the easier it becomes to hear this deeper one. You begin recognizing that taking your power back is not an act of force. It is an act of remembrance. You remember that another person's opinion cannot define the awareness within you. You remember that uncertainty cannot separate you from the present moment. You remember that comparison cannot tell you the purpose of your path. You remember that control is not the same as safety. You remember that fear may speak loudly without speaking truth. And beneath all of this remembering, another possibility begins to appear. If you are not the fear, the resentment, the judgment, the roles, or the stories you have carried for so long, then who are you? Perhaps this is where the journey turns inward in an entirely new way. Because once you have seen through some of the ego's patterns, you are no longer only asking what you need to release. You begin asking what remains when you release it. And what remains may be closer to your true nature than anything you have been trying so hard to become. When you begin to see that you are not every thought that passes through your mind, not every fear that visits, not every role you have played, something within you becomes quieter. You may not have all the answers. You may still be carrying questions. You may still be healing. But there is a little more space between who you are and the stories you have believed about yourself. And in that space, another kind of life becomes possible. Not a perfect life, not a life without pain, but a life in which you no longer have to leave yourself every time life becomes difficult. This is where returning to your true self begins. It does not begin by building a new identity. It begins by releasing the identities that have kept you far from your own inner presence. You may have spent years trying to become the person others would approve of. The responsible one, the strong one, the agreeable one, the successful one, the one who never needs help, the one who keeps the peace, the one who does not disappoint anyone. And perhaps those roles helped you survive certain seasons of life. Perhaps they gave you belonging. Perhaps they helped you feel safe. But eventually, a role becomes heavy when you forget that it is only a role. You may reach a point where your life looks acceptable from the outside, yet something inside feels absent. You cannot quite explain it. You are functioning. You are showing up. You are doing what is expected. But there is a distance between the life you are living and the self you feel quietly calling from within. This is not necessarily a crisis. Sometimes it is an invitation, a whisper that says, come back. Come back to the part of you that existed before you learned to perform for love. Come back to the part of you that does not need to impress anyone. Come back to the part of you that can sit in silence without asking what it should become next. The true self is not loud. The ego is often loud because it needs constant reinforcement. It says, look at me, approve of me, choose me, tell me I am safe. The deeper self does not need to advertise itself. It simply is. Perhaps you have felt it in moments when you were not trying, walking alone under the evening sky, sitting beside the ocean, holding the hand of someone you love, watching a child sleep, listening to rain without thinking about tomorrow. There are moments when the mind becomes quiet enough for you to feel connected to something larger than the personality you carry through the day. For a few seconds, you are not managing your image. You are not correcting the past. You are not predicting the future. You are simply present. And perhaps that presence is one of the closest ways we experience the Source. Not as an idea, not as a doctrine, but as the quiet intelligence of being fully here. Returning to your true self means learning to recognize those moments and allowing them to become more than accidents. You begin creating room for them. You become less fascinated by noise, less dependent on constant distraction, less willing to live entirely from the surface of your mind. And as this deepens, forgiveness becomes possible in a new way. Forgiveness is often misunderstood because the ego hears the word and thinks immediately about fairness. Why should I forgive them? What they did was wrong. They never apologize. They are not sorry. And perhaps all of that is true. Forgiveness does not erase truth. It does not require you to rewrite history. It does not ask you to return to a harmful relationship. It does not ask you to pretend that something painful did not matter. Forgiveness is not always reconciliation. Sometimes forgiveness is simply the decision to stop carrying an old wound as an identity. Imagine someone who betrayed you many years ago. For a long time, the memory may have protected you. It taught you to be careful. It reminded you not to trust too quickly. It helped you create distance from what once hurt you. But perhaps there comes a time when the protection becomes a prison. You meet someone kind, but you do not trust them because of someone who existed in your past. You experience love, but part of you is already preparing for betrayal. You hear a certain tone of voice, and your body returns to an old moment. The past is no longer physically present, but it is still shaping the present. This is where forgiveness becomes an act of power. You may close your eyes and say inwardly, I do not approve of what happened, but I am no longer willing to build my future around it. Nothing dramatic needs to occur. There may be no sudden release. Forgiveness can happen slowly, layer by layer. Some days you feel free, other days the memory returns. You do not have to call this failure. You can simply notice that another layer is asking to be released. The ocean does not empty itself in one wave. Healing can be like that. You return again and again, not to the pain, to the freedom beneath it. And forgiveness is not only for other people. Sometimes the person you are still punishing is yourself. You remember something you said 10 years ago, a choice you wish you had made differently, a relationship you stayed in too long, an opportunity you ignored, a moment when fear made the decision for you. And the ego keeps bringing the memory back as evidence. See, this is who you are. But perhaps the fact that you can see the choice differently today is proof that you are no longer the same consciousness that made it. You are responding with the awareness you had then. This does not remove responsibility. It removes the cruelty from responsibility. There is a difference. You can acknowledge a mistake without turning the mistake into your identity. You can repair what can be repaired. You can apologize. You can learn, and then you can allow yourself to continue. A tree does not refuse to grow because one branch broke during a storm. Life keeps moving toward life. Perhaps you are allowed to do the same. Self-forgiveness is one of the ways you take your power back from the past. Not by pretending, by no longer allowing an old version of you to decide whether the present version deserves peace. And from forgiveness, surrender begins. Surrender can sound frightening because the ego interprets it as giving up. But spiritual surrender is not passive resignation. It is releasing the exhausting belief that you must control everything before you can trust anything. So imagine standing in a river. If you fight the current constantly, your body becomes exhausted. You may believe the river is the problem, but some of the exhaustion comes from the struggle against its movement. Surrender does not mean allowing yourself to be carried into danger. It means recognizing the difference between wise action and useless resistance. There are things you can change. There are things you cannot. There are moments to speak. There are moments to leave. There are moments to act. And there are moments when the most loving thing you can do is stop arguing with what has already happened. You cannot change the fact that someone left. You cannot return to the age you were 20 years ago. You cannot force someone to love you. You cannot make another person ready for the conversation you want to have. You cannot guarantee that tomorrow will unfold according to plan. But you can meet reality without adding the second wound of resistance. The first wound is what happened. The second wound is the endless thought, this should not have happened. Sometimes that second wound hurts for much longer than the first. Acceptance does not mean you like reality. It means you stop demanding that the present moment become something else before you are willing to meet it. And when you stop fighting what is already here, energy becomes available for something new. You can ask, what does love look like now? That question is very different from, how do I get my old life back? Perhaps your old life is gone. Perhaps a relationship ended. Perhaps a dream changed. Perhaps your body changed. Perhaps a door closed. The ego says, return me to what I lost. The deeper self may ask, what is life inviting me to become aware of now? Again, not become as in building another identity. Become aware. Become present. Become willing. There may be a new season you cannot see yet because you are still facing the old one. Think of autumn. The tree releases what it can no longer keep. It does not call the falling leaf a failure. It does not cling to every branch in fear that letting go will destroy it. There is an intelligence in release, and perhaps the same intelligence exists in your life. Some things leave because their season is complete. Some identities fall away because they can no longer contain who you are becoming aware of. Some relationships change form. Some ambitions lose their importance. Some fears become too exhausting to carry. And there comes a moment when you do not let go because you are strong enough. You let go because holding on has become more painful than releasing. This is often when intention changes too. At first, intention may be another form of control. You decide what you want, and then you try to force life toward it. You say, this must happen. This person must stay. This opportunity must work. I must be here by this age. Then spiritual intention begins to feel different. Instead of demanding a specific outcome, you begin choosing the quality of energy you want to bring to your life. You may say, I intend to meet this day with kindness. I intend to speak truthfully without cruelty. I intend to notice when fear is making my choices. I intend to return to peace when I forget. I intend to remain open to a life larger than the one I can currently imagine. This kind of intention does not tighten your grip. It opens your hands. You still participate. You still make choices. You still move toward what feels meaningful, but you leave room for intelligence beyond your own planning. There is humility in this. The mind sees a few steps. Life sees a much larger landscape. You may look back at something that once felt like a terrible disappointment and realize that it redirected you toward a life you would never have chosen consciously. Perhaps someone did not choose you. At the time, it felt like rejection. Years later, you see that the ending created space for a relationship that allowed you to be more fully yourself. Perhaps a job ended. At the time, it felt like failure. Later, it led you toward work that felt more aligned. Perhaps you lost a plan, and in losing it, you discovered a part of yourself that the plan would never have allowed you to meet. This does not mean every painful event must be romanticized. Not every loss needs a beautiful explanation. Some things simply hurt. Some questions remain unanswered. Spiritual trust does not require you to invent meaning where you cannot see it. It simply allows you to say, I do not understand this, but I am willing to remain open. That openness is powerful. The ego wants certainty before it can relax. Trust allows you to breathe even when certainty is unavailable. You may not know what comes next, but you can know how you want to meet what comes next. You can meet it with awareness, with courage, with gentleness, with less resistance, with more love. And perhaps this is what living in harmony with the source really means. Not believing that a higher intelligence will arrange every event according to your wishes, but learning to align your inner life with qualities that feel closer to the source. Peace, compassion, patience, truth, love, forgiveness, gratitude. You begin noticing how different your experience becomes when you ask not, what can I get from this moment, but what can I bring to this moment? You walk into a difficult conversation and bring calm. You enter uncertainty and bring trust. You meet someone else's anger and bring boundaries without hatred. You meet your own fear and bring compassion. You meet the morning and bring gratitude. This is inner alignment. The world may not immediately change, but you do. And then, because you are different within the situation begins to feel different too. Imagine two people caught in the same rainstorm. One spends the entire walk home angry that the rain exists. The other accepts that they are wet, notices the cool air, and keeps walking. The rain is the same. The experience is not. Much of your freedom may come from this realization. You cannot always choose the weather. You can begin choosing the consciousness that walks through it. And love becomes central here. Not sentimental love. Not love as attachment. Love as a way of seeing. Love looks at another human being and remembers that beneath their behavior there is also fear, longing, confusion, conditioning, and a desire to belong. This does not mean you excuse harmful behavior. It means you no longer need hatred in order to create distance. You can say, I cannot continue this relationship and still release the need to condemn the person's entire being. You can say, this behavior is not acceptable to me without making yourself spiritually dependent on resentment. You can choose yourself without making another person your enemy. This is a very mature form of power. The ego often believes power requires opposition. Someone wins, someone loses, someone is right, someone is wrong, someone dominates, someone submits. But the true self does not need an enemy to know its strength. Its power comes from alignment. Think of light entering a dark room. It does not fight darkness. It simply appears. And where light is present, darkness changes naturally. Perhaps your awareness is like that. You do not need to battle every unconscious pattern. You bring awareness to it. You bring compassion. You bring honesty. And little by little, what was hidden begins to transform. You notice when you are speaking from fear, you pause. You notice when you are trying to control someone, you soften. You notice when comparison has stolen your gratitude, you return to what is already good. You notice when resentment enters an old wound, you remember your intention to be free. This is not perfection. It is practice, and practice is deeply human. There will be days when you forget everything. You will react. You will overthink. You will say something from fear. You will compare. You will try to control. You may even wonder whether you have grown at all. But awareness can return in the middle of the mistake. That is one of the most beautiful things about it. You do not have to wait until tomorrow. You can become aware halfway through an argument, halfway through a fearful thought, halfway through a day you have spent judging yourself. The moment awareness returns, the path returns. You can say, I forgot, not I failed. I forgot. There is such gentleness in those words, because spiritual growth may be less about achieving a permanent state of peace and more about remembering the way back more quickly. You wander, you notice, you return. You wander again, you return again. Like the breath, like the tide. No self-condemnation is required. And with each return, trust grows. You begin trusting yourself not because you always know the answer, but because you know you can become still enough to listen. You begin trusting life not because it always gives you what you want, but because you discover that you can survive seasons you once thought would break you. You begin trusting love because you see that love does not disappear simply because a relationship ends. The form changes, the source remains. This may be especially important in grief. When someone you love is no longer physically present, the ego can feel as though love has been taken away. But perhaps love and presence are not identical. The form of the relationship changes. The habits change. The conversations change. The physical presence is gone, and grief deserves to be felt. But the love itself does not necessarily vanish. It may become memory, gratitude, tenderness, a quiet influence on the person you are still becoming. You begin to understand that love is not only something someone gives you, it is also something awakened within you by knowing them. And what has awakened within you can continue to live. This does not remove grief. It gives grief a deeper place to rest. You may begin to feel grateful that something mattered enough to be missed. Gratitude and grief can exist together. So can pain and peace. This is another way the ego's either-or thinking begins to dissolve. You do not have to choose between sadness and spiritual trust. You can be sad and trusting. You can be uncertain and peaceful. You can miss someone and still move forward. You can have boundaries and still love. You can forgive and still remember. You can let go and still care. The deeper self can hold more than the ego believes. It is spacious, like the sky. And when you begin living from that spaciousness, gratitude changes too. Gratitude is no longer a technique for getting more. It becomes a way of returning to reality. You look at your life and notice what fear has trained you to overlook. The breath moving without instruction, a quiet room, a person who stayed A lesson learned slowly. A body that has carried you through so much. The chance to begin again this morning. Gratitude does not deny what is missing. It keeps what is missing from becoming the only thing you can see. It widens your vision. And in that wider vision, you begin recognizing that much of what you were searching for outside was already appearing in small forms around you. You wanted peace, and there was a quiet morning. You wanted love, and there was someone listening. You wanted meaning, and there was a moment when you helped someone feel less alone. You wanted connection to the source, and there was your own breath inviting you back into the present. Maybe the sacred has always been closer than the mind expects. The ego searches for extraordinary signs. The deeper self recognizes the extraordinary inside the ordinary. A seed opening underground, light moving across a wall, a sincere apology, a moment of restraint when you could have chosen anger, a breath before reacting, a decision to forgive yourself. These may not look dramatic, but entire lives can change through quiet choices. And this is where taking your power back becomes less like an idea and more like a way of being. You no longer ask everyone else to create your peace. You participate in creating it from within. You no longer wait for the past to change. You change your relationship with the past. You no longer require certainty. You cultivate trust. You no longer confuse control with love. You allow. You no longer confuse resentment with strength. You release. You no longer confuse performance with worth. You remember. And slowly, you begin to feel something you may not have felt for a long time. You feel at home within yourself, not because everything is resolved, but because you are no longer running away from your own presence. You can sit with yourself. You can listen. You can feel. You can breathe. And maybe this is the home you were searching for in approval, relationships, achievements, certainty, and control. The home was never out there. It was the place within you where you no longer needed to become someone else in order to deserve your own love. From this place, life begins to feel different. Not easier in every moment, but less adversarial. You are no longer standing across from life, demanding that it prove itself to you. You are moving with it, listening, responding, trusting, adjusting, like a river that does not know every landscape it will cross, but keeps moving toward the sea. And perhaps you do not need to know the whole journey either. You may only need to know the quality of presence you want to bring to the next moment. There is still one important question left. How do you carry this awareness into ordinary life? How do you remember it on the morning when anxiety returns? How do you stay connected to yourself when someone triggers an old wound? How do you practice forgiveness when resentment feels easier? How do you trust when life becomes uncertain again? The answer may be simpler than the mind expects. Because inner freedom is not usually built through one enormous spiritual breakthrough. It is lived through small moments of remembrance, a pause, a breath, a choice, a return, again and again, until returning to yourself begins to feel more natural than leaving yourself behind. And so the journey eventually returns to the ordinary moments of your life, not to a mountaintop, not to some distant spiritual destination, not to a version of you who never feels fear again. It returns to the morning when you first open your eyes, to the conversation that tests your patience, to the memory that still hurts, to the moment when someone misunderstands you, to the evening when your mind begins moving too quickly. This is where inner freedom becomes real. Because peace is not something you prove when life is quiet. It is something you remember when life becomes noisy. And remembering can be very simple. You may begin with stillness, before the phone, before the news, before the demands of the day. Perhaps you give yourself one quiet moment. You sit, you breathe. You do not ask yourself to solve your life. You simply notice that you are here. The mind may already be speaking. There may be plans, worries, responsibilities, unfinished conversations. Let them be there. You do not need to push them away. You can allow your thoughts to move like clouds across the morning sky while you remain aware of the space behind them. Even a few minutes of this can remind you of something important. You are not beginning the day as an empty person waiting for the world to tell you who you are. You are beginning from presence, from awareness, from the quiet life already moving within you. Then, as the day unfolds, you can practice noticing the moments when your power begins to leave your hands. Perhaps someone says something that irritates you. You feel the familiar reaction rising. Before you respond, you pause. not because you are suppressing yourself, because you are giving awareness enough time to enter. You may ask, what am I about to protect? Sometimes the answer is your dignity, sometimes a boundary, but sometimes it is simply the ego wanting to be right. That one moment of awareness can change the entire conversation. You may still speak, you may still disagree, but you speak from a different place. You no longer need your words to injure another person in order to prove that you were injured. This is how peace becomes practical, not by avoiding conflict, by bringing a different consciousness into it. There will also be moments when comparison returns. You will see someone who appears to have what you want. For a moment, your own life may seem smaller. When that happens, perhaps you return to gratitude. Not forced gratitude, not pretending that you do not have desires, just a quiet remembering of what is already here. You notice the people who love you, the lessons you have survived, the breath entering your body, the fact that you are still capable of beginning again. Gratitude brings you back from the imagined life into the actual life. And the actual life is the only place where peace can be experienced. You cannot feel peace tomorrow. You cannot feel gratitude yesterday. Everything spiritual eventually brings you back to now. Forgiveness can become part of this daily remembering too. You may wake one morning and discover that an old resentment has returned. Do not be discouraged. Perhaps forgiveness is not a door you walk through only once. Perhaps it is a path you choose whenever the old pain asks you to return. You can say inwardly, I do not want to carry this today. Not because the past was acceptable. Because today deserves to be more than a continuation of yesterday. You might imagine setting down a heavy bag you have been carrying for years. At first, your body may still remember the weight. Your hand may almost reach for it again. That is okay. You are learning what it feels like to walk without it. And sometimes the person you need to forgive that morning is yourself. You may notice an old mistake, a regret, a moment when you were less loving than you wish you had been. Instead of repeating the punishment, you can ask, what did this teach me? Then let the lesson remain without keeping the wound open. Wisdom does not require endless self-condemnation. You can learn and still be gentle with yourself. You can change without hating who you used to be. You can grow without making your past an enemy. And then there is trust. Perhaps this is one of the most difficult practices because life will continue to contain uncertainty. There will always be questions you cannot answer, people you cannot control, outcomes you cannot guarantee. Trust does not remove these things. It changes your posture toward them. Instead of saying, I must know what happens next before I can be peaceful, you begin saying, I can meet the next moment when it arrives. That is enough. The mind wants the whole road. Life often gives you only the next few steps. You may think of walking through the night with a small lantern. The lantern does not illuminate the entire landscape. It only reveals enough ground for you to continue. And perhaps that is all you need. One honest choice, one loving response, one boundary, one breath, one act of courage, one moment of surrender. You do not need to live the rest of your life today. You only need to meet this moment without abandoning yourself. This is how taking your power back becomes a daily spiritual practice. Not dramatic, not forceful, quiet. You notice when fear is speaking, you return to love. You notice when judgment is closing your heart, you return to understanding. You notice when control is tightening your body, you return to trust. You notice when resentment is pulling you backward, you return to forgiveness. You notice when comparison makes you forget your own path, you return to gratitude. And every return strengthens something within you. Not because you are becoming someone new, because you are remembering what has always been underneath the noise. There is a peaceful intelligence within you that does not need constant approval. There is a loving presence within you that does not disappear when someone rejects you. There is an awareness within you that can witness fear without becoming fear. There is something in you that has survived every version of your life so far, every ending, every disappointment, every uncertain season, and it is still here. Perhaps this is what you have been searching for. You thought you needed more certainty, more control, more validation, more explanation. But what you may have needed most was a deeper relationship with your own inner presence. Because once you begin living from there, the world changes without necessarily changing at all. The same people may still misunderstand you. The same future may still be uncertain. The same memories may still exist. But they no longer determine the entire quality of your inner life. You have stopped handing them that responsibility. And this is freedom, not the freedom to control everything, the freedom to remain connected to yourself when you cannot. There is a profound peace in knowing that you do not need to win every argument. You do not need everyone to like you. You do not need the past to apologize. You do not need tomorrow to promise you anything. You can stand in the middle of an unfinished life and still feel whole. You can say, I do not know what is coming, but I know what I want to bring to it. Peace, kindness, awareness, trust, love, and perhaps that is enough. Imagine a river moving toward the ocean. It does not stop at every stone and ask why the stone was placed there. It moves around some obstacles. It moves through others. Sometimes it slows. Sometimes it becomes powerful. Sometimes it appears almost still. But it keeps belonging to the movement of life. You are allowed to move this way too. You do not need to force every door. You do not need to understand every ending. You do not need to carry every wound forever. You can move. You can release. You can trust. And one day, perhaps quietly, you may notice that the life you once thought needed to change completely no longer feels like the problem it once did. Because something within you has changed. You are less reactive, less afraid of silence, less dependent on approval, less interested in proving yourself, more willing to forgive, more willing to listen, more grateful for what is here, more comfortable with what you cannot know. And in that quiet shift, you may realize that taking your power back was never about becoming powerful in the way the world often describes power. It was about coming home to the place within you that does not need to dominate, coming home to the awareness that can love without controlling, coming home to the peace that exists before the argument, coming home to the part of you that remembers its connection to something greater. The source has never been far away. Perhaps it has been present in every breath you forgot to notice. In every moment you chose kindness when fear would have been easier. In every time you forgave. In every time you released what you could no longer carry. In every moment of stillness when you stopped searching and simply listened. And maybe as you listen now, you can feel a small part of that stillness. You do not have to name it. You do not have to understand it. Just notice it. There is nothing you need to become in this moment. Nothing you need to prove. Nothing you need to force. You are allowed to simply be here. And perhaps the wisdom you have been searching for has been waiting inside this simple awareness all along. Your power was never truly in another person's hands. Your peace was never meant to depend entirely on the world outside you. Your deepest self was never lost. You only became distracted from it. And every time you return to awareness, forgiveness, gratitude, love, and trust, you remember. You remember who you were before fear told you who you had to become. You remember the quiet self beneath the noise. You remember that peace is not somewhere you arrive. It is something you return to, again and again. And perhaps from this moment forward, when life feels heavy, you can ask yourself one gentle question. Am I giving this moment more power than it was ever meant to have? Then breathe. Listen. Return. If something in this journey touched a part of you, you may want to share in the comments what you are ready to release, forgive, or see differently. Your reflection may become the reminder someone else needs today. And if you would like to continue exploring these quiet journeys into awareness, inner peace, forgiveness, and the deeper self, you are welcome to subscribe and return whenever you need a place to remember. For now, there is nothing more to do. Let the mind become quiet. Let the heart soften. Let what is finished fall away. And trust that the peace you have been looking for may already be closer than you imagined. It may have been within you all along.